We'll start with this breaking news. Japan's prime minister is inside the White House right now ahead of the president's planned summit with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. T-minus 5 days and counting. Let's go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. President Trump huddling with Japan's Shinzo Abe at the White House. They're in a working lunch right now ahead of the G7 summit first in Canada tomorrow and the president's departure for the historic sit-down with North Korea's dictator. That's on June 12th. 5 days away. The two leaders expected to hold a joint news conference just about an hour from now. And the visit comes amid reports that Japan is increasingly concerned that the United States will overlook their interests when making a deal with North Korea, including allowing the North to retain missiles, which could strike Japan or South Korea. The future of America's military presence in the region is another big concern, a question, according to Japan. A short time ago, the president insisted that he will take a hard line toward the North Korea government, as he says he's ready to go for the summit.
I think I'm very well prepared. I don't think I have to prepare very much. It's about attitude. It's about willingness to get things done. But I think I've been preparing for the summit for a long time, as has the other side. I think they've been preparing for a long time also. So this isn't a question of preparation. It's a question of whether or not people want it to happen. And we'll know that very quickly.
Also ready to go, Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts on the North Lawn right now. Take it away, my friend.
Harris, good afternoon to you. Yes, Japan does certainly have concerns about what might happen in the talks that the president is about to have with Kim Jong-un. You mentioned the intermediate-range missiles that can threaten Japan. Abe told the president back in April at Mar-a-Lago he wants that addressed. He also would like to have addressed, and the president promised he would, the issue of Japanese citizens who were kidnapped by North Korea. You heard the president say, and really pushing back against his critics to say he's not prepared for this, that he's well prepared. Both the United States and North Korea have been prepared for this for a long, long time. It's about attitude. It's about a willingness to get things done. The president also hopeful that they could get some success in their first meeting, but also suggesting that it's going to take a lot more meetings than that. The president saying there's a lot of enemies out there, a lot of dislike, hatred between the countries. He said it's not going to be just a photo op. At a minimum, it's going to be the start of a good relationship. He'd like to say that it could happen in one meeting, but likely that it is going to take more than that. He said they have to denuke, and that's the word that the president used. If they don't denuclearize, then the talks are not going to go anywhere. The president also saying he's going to keep sanctions on until such time as North Korea begins to show a commitment toward denuclearization. But for the meantime, and he told us this last Friday, but reiterating it, he's going to hold off on any more sanctions against North Korea to see how the talks go. Now, there was a little bit of a bump earlier today when the president's outside counsel, his chief attorney in the Russia investigation, Rudy Giuliani, traveling in Israel, suggested that Kim Jong-un came crawling back to the United States, begging to have the summit put back on after the president said in that letter 2 weeks ago today, canceling the summit. Listen to what Giuliani said.
They also said they were going to go to nuclear war against us. They were going to defeat us in a nuclear war. We said, well, we're not going to have a summit under those circumstances. Well, Kim Jong-un got back on his hands and knees and begged for it, which is exactly the position you want to put him in.
Well, the White House is looking very closely to see what the North Korean reaction might be to that. You'll remember back on the 29th of April when John Bolton, the national security advisor, said, well, we're thinking about the Libyan model for North Korean denuclearization. That's what put the whole thing off the rails. I think that North Korea is smart enough to know that Rudy Giuliani is the president's outside attorney. He's not a White House official, doesn't speak for the president. And according to one White House official, that was just Rudy being Rudy. But the White House clearly, Harris, wants to make sure that nothing happens to derail the summit because they are this close and they really think that they could get something done on Tuesday, Singapore time, Monday here in the United States.
All right, John Roberts, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin of New York, sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, welcome. Great to see you today. Let's start with, if we can, kind of those comments by Rudy Giuliani. And, you know, John gave another example of a previous comment, too. These are not helpful. Why is that happening?
Well, I think it, as was pointed out, as Rudy being Rudy, I believe that it was rhetorical, obviously. that the North Koreans did make a very provoking statement that caused President Trump to cancel the summit, and then North Korea changed its tune. That's a good thing. But you will have people in our country, including someone like the Mayor Giuliani, who may describe it the way that he did. I'm just happy that the summit is supposedly on track for Tuesday, and there's a prospect of a denuclearized North Korea, possibly peace on the Korean Peninsula, and that's all good. That's what I'm focused on.
Yeah, he's the president's attorney. We'll see what effect it has, if any at all, because it looks like it's on track. Let's talk about Japan. The relationship between this president and the leader of Japan is very solid, it would look like, from anywhere you sit. I mean, they've had so many meetings. They're said to have spoken up to 30 times in recent months since the president has been in office. What do you make of the importance, the significance of that relationship to what's about to happen with the summit?
Oh, it's been huge. The president's relationship with Japan, with South Korea, the relationship that he's built even with the Chinese leadership. All throughout that region, you've had countries, both large and small, they've played important roles in, if you look back, August of 2017, a unanimous UN Security Council resolution gets passed that even China and Russia voted for, effectively cutting off over 1/3 of North Koreans' exports. So the president's first year in office was really important for not only showing Kim Jong-un that we have a military option as real, but building up relationships with leaders in that region so that we have the maximum effectiveness on the multilateral diplomacy and the economic pressure that was ramped up with, as we saw, the support of even the Chinese. So the president building that relationship, not just with the Japanese leader, but all throughout that entire region, I think has been very important to get to where we are today.
You know, sitting on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I would imagine you are uniquely perched to look at Japan in particular, though, and say, what kind of influence do they have? I mean, they're asking, reports have Shinzo Abe asking our president potentially today to help out with Japanese citizens who've been taken by the North Korean government. They say the number's 15 to 17. Some organizations say it's in the hundreds. I mean, what do they want us to do? How are they playing a role in that summit asking for things like that?
Well, for one, where our interests are very much overlapped, where the United States is fighting for American interests in our talks with North Korea, fighting to denuclearize North Korea, for there to be peace on the Korean Peninsula. These are demands that are being made by Donald Trump and by the United States of America that directly benefit Japan. Now, Japan has other asks that may be more specific for Japan. Maybe it is in America's best interest to be able to help Japan with some of their asks, especially, I mean, I've seen reports of how many people the North Koreans have imprisoned that they just can't afford to hold on to all of these political prisoners. I think it would be in North Korea's best interest if Donald Trump chose to, if he decided it was in the best interest of America, to make asks for some of these other countries. And for America, it builds goodwill with a nation like Japan. So I think it's a reasonable request by the Japanese. It's not our top priority, obviously, but I think one that might end up becoming part of the summit, potentially, but I would defer to the White House.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure the world is watching that, as part of this deal, even before the president agreed, yeah, this is on, we're going to sit down, he brought 3 Americans home. And I guess if you have people that are imprisoned in North Korea, you're probably looking at President Trump and saying, he was successful in this times 3. Maybe he can help out. Let's move on. The president is sounding off on a bombshell Senate report, no doubt you know about this, alleging the Obama White House secretly granted Iran access to the U.S. financial system after that 2015 nuclear deal was struck. And that report claims this was a violation of U.S. sanctions, and that a top Obama official or officials misled Congress and the American people about this. The president tweeted this: the Obama administration is now accused of trying to give Iran secret access to the financial system of the United States. This is totally illegal. Perhaps we could get the 13 angry Democrats to divert some of their energy to this matter, as Comey would call it, investigate, exclamation point. Congressman Zeldin, your response.
Well, consequences of Barack Obama and his administration, John Kerry and others, trying to pursue the Iran nuclear deal the way that they did, for one, they aren't in the White House anymore. Donald Trump got elected president. Republicans are in charge of the House and the Senate. The foreign policy, and specifically the Iran policy, was one that clearly to the American public was in the best interest of our country. So before, during, and after these negotiations, we saw some really bad negotiating tactics that were used, a lack of transparency with the American public. So, for example, red lines get crossed. Maybe Barack Obama cared about dates that the Iranians didn't. We said that the sanctions relief was going to be phased in over time based on compliance, where they were immediate, no suspension. We said that we were going to gain access to military sites, and the Iranians said before, during, and after the negotiations, you'll have no access. So fast forward to what we're learning today. We were misled. Congress was misled. The American public was misled on this and others. They were not supposed to have access to our financial markets. When they detained our Navy sailors, John Kerry's response was, thank you. We paid a ransom on pallets of cash in order to get our hostages back. So this isn't new for us to be misled. It's just another thing to add to the list as evidence that before, during, and after this negotiation that America got played. And when Barack Obama got played, all of us got played as a result.
Well, and to add to, you mentioned John Kerry, our former Secretary of State. He even acknowledged that some of that money that was given to Iran might actually end up being used for terrorism in one way, shape, or another. Also kind of gasoline on this fire. Thank you very much, Congressman. Good to have you today.
Thank you, Harris.
The Department of Homeland Security released new statistics on arrests at the border, and they are up for the third month in a row. In the month of May, U.S. border agents have arrested more than 50,000 migrants accused of trying to enter the country illegally. William Lajeunesse is on the story from Los Angeles. William?
Well, Harris, the numbers tell us the president's effort to shut the door on illegal immigration remains a work in progress. Why? Well, most of those who were caught in May were already on their way before the campaign to prosecute all adults and separate women and children. Still, those apprehensions were up almost 300% over last year, with more fleeing poverty and violence in Central America and Mexico.
Demographic is shifting some, though, as it is moving out of the Rio Grande Valley. But this area, because of the lack of infrastructure, because of the needed resources, this is a prime location for transnational criminal organizations to bring people to try to cross the border.
So the biggest increase in apprehensions, families up 400%, unaccompanied children up 300%, led by Mexico and Guatemala. Why? Well, the administration blames rulings requiring it to release unaccompanied children after 3 weeks in custody, and the asylum loophole, which allows 80% of Central Americans to live in the U.S., though most claims are ultimately rejected. One solution, the administration wants to hold or prosecute everyone as a deterrent.
What we're focused on is making sure there's a consequence for illegal actions. If you cross the border illegally, the Attorney General, Secretary Nielsen, have made it clear that they expect no categories to be exempt from criminal sanction for that act.
So for perspective, Harris, the May apprehensions are up about 5% over April. What is different, of course, is last year, the apprehensions fell to an all-time low, so these numbers look pretty dramatic. They may level out. Next month should tell us something because the seasonal changes in immigration patterns.
That's an interesting point, because when you go to kind of a base low and you come back, anything above that looks like a big jump in increase. Real quickly, do you know which parts of the border are more porous for this happening right now? Is that obvious?
Well, the Rio Grande Valley remains number one. About 40% of all apprehensions are there. But numbers are going up in San Diego, Yuma, El Paso, and... Did I say San Diego?
Yeah, you did.
Tucson. Nogales is part of this Tucson sector, but you're right. It's being spread out is one thing that they're saying. Back to you.
All right. William, thank you very much. Great to get the report. Growing pressure on Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein after the Justice Department responds to calls for him to recuse himself from Robert Mueller's special investigation. Now, one powerful Republican says the DOJ response is not enough. What's needed? We'll talk about it. And at least one prominent Democrat is up in arms over the DOJ's plans to brief Congress again on an informant that was inside the Trump campaign. The unanswered questions and why Democrats are opposed to the transparency. It's a question. We'll talk about it, too. Fox News Alert, new reaction to a Justice Department offer to hold a second briefing for a bipartisan group of top lawmakers on classified intelligence information related to the Russia investigation. You may recall DOJ and FBI officials briefed congressional leaders on this issue just last month, following requests from two top House Republicans. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live in D.C. with the details. Catherine?
Well, thanks, Harris. The records focus on the FBI's alleged use of a confidential human source contacting Trump campaign aides at the height of the 2016 presidential election. A short time ago, the House Speaker Paul Ryan responded to questions from Fox News about the latest Justice Department offer, which will not make the records available to lawmakers until early next week.
We received an oral briefing 2 weeks ago, but what we're asking for and what we require and we expect is the corroborating documents that back up that oral briefing. And last night, they could have brought it to us today, and they chose to do it next week. That doesn't help.
Late last night, after midnight, a Justice Department official told reporters about this latest offer to brief and confirmed that at the previous session, the records were in the room, but not read by lawmakers. Quote, the department and FBI are prepared to brief members on certain questions specifically raised by the Speaker and other members. The department will also provide the documents that were available for review. Now, this is the key section, but not inspected by the members at the previous briefing, along with some additional material. This morning, the Speaker said the Justice Department can end the back and forth.
Frankly, the sooner the Department of Justice complies with all of our document requests, which are legitimate document requests, the better this is going to be for everybody. And had they complied with these document requests earlier when we made them, we probably could have spared the country of all this drama.
Three sources close to the discussions told Fox News the Justice Department originally offered to make the documents available this morning to Chairman Nunes and Chairman Gowdy, but at the last minute, the timeline shifted again, adding that the intelligence is not so sensitive that it should be limited only to members of the Gang of Eight. Harris.
Catherine, thank you very much.
You're
Let's
welcome.
get to Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert from Texas, member of the House Judiciary Committee. This feels a little bit like funny business. Like, what's happening with this?
Well, it sounds like funny business because it's ridiculous. These are games that are being played by some of the Mueller cartel at DOJ. As long as we have a special counsel who will not even confess as to his limits, then this is going to continue to be a problem. As long as we have Republicans who are in leadership positions who think it's okay to have Orwellian spies spy on presidential campaigns of one party, then we have bigger problems than just the briefing. But now, I don't know what was said in the previous briefing. I don't know what was in the documents, but my understanding is the people that showed up filibustered for most of the hour talking and left no time to review the documents. So it wasn't like the people who went did not want to review the documents. They just came in and made sure they didn't have time to review the documents and will come back later. This is outrageous. You don't even have to have FBI officials or DOJ officials there to do the briefing. Just provide the dadgum documents and let smart people here look at them. That is the real problem. And the more they obfuscate and delay, the more it tells any sensible person there are massive problems with this whole Russia investigation, with Mueller, with Rosenstein, with Wiseman, with Comey, and that's why we need a second special counsel that will dig and show Mueller for, I mean, it's becoming a criminal cartel.
Let me step in for one thing. You called Mueller's group investigation a cartel. That's a pretty fierce language.
You bet it is, because what do you call? Well, look, Harris, every time we've had a special, you bet it is. Every time we've had a special counsel, they went, whether it was Democrat controlled or inspired or Republican, they come in, they want to go out of their way to make sure people that are working on their team do not even have the appearance of having a bias. What did Mueller do? He intentionally went for people that hated Republicans, hated Trump, and wanted to bring Trump
The
down.
pushback has
and
been that he
loved
went for the
Clinton.
people that he thought could do the job.
Well, actually, Harris, it's worse than that. He went for people like Weissman and others who had worked with him on the Russia investigation when they were trying to illegally get uranium. So it sounds like to me they've got a little bit of a CYA situation here, not only going after Republicans like Trump, but also trying to diminish anybody that could come in and look at their malfeasance in the original Russia investigation.
No one can ever miss your passion on issues, Congressman.
Well, this is outrageous.
But this time,
really
and I interview you enough to know the difference between that passion and where you're really angry. And I sense that there is a difference here, and I wonder what equals justice in this case in your eyes, because you can't force them to give up something apparently that they don't want to give up at the DOJ in their time. So what?
Yeah, well, we do. We can. And it's real easy. If we get enough gumption, we don't have the power a judge does, but we do have the power to say, you know what? You really have not been fair about producing things that make sure
These
you're
are fellow
acting properly.
Republicans.
So
what do you say to them?
Well, I know that's why I started out by saying when you got Republicans that think it's okay to spy on their presidential campaign that they didn't support really whole hog, then that is a major problem. And we have Republicans that feel that way. But this isn't just for us, or it isn't just for this generation, but the precedents that have been set by the Obama DOJ. I mean, Harris, we're talking about complete transition from a self-governing society to one where the deep state controls no matter who's the president, and that's why what we're doing now is so very important.
Congressman, as the American people look at this, though, if they don't see a weakening of these institutions that are there to protect us, and that's a risk that you run when you have leaks and you have these types of battles, particularly those over information that eventually, I guess, they're going to release just with delay after delay. Congressman, we'll bring you back. Great to talk with you today.
It's a danger when you have somebody like Mueller that grabs people they don't like and then tries to find a crime, and it's a problem.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Harris.
Good to have you. Meanwhile, growing pressure on Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to recuse himself from overseeing Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. This picked up steam when GOP Senator Lindsey Graham wrote a letter asking Rosenstein if his recommendation to fire former FBI Director James Comey makes him a witness in a potential obstruction of justice probe involving President Trump, and whether he should then recuse himself from the matter. The Justice Department responded this way, quote, "The Deputy Attorney General would recuse from all or part of any matter if recusal were deemed appropriate by department officials who are informed about the matter. Otherwise, he has a responsibility to fulfill his oath to well and faithfully execute the duties of his office." That response not sitting well with Lindsey Graham. The senator repeated his concerns with Rosenstein. Watch.
I'm really curious as to how Rosenstein could be involved in overseeing an investigation if he's going to be a witness.
Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. On this very news set, you and I said last week, I wonder if recusal will be next.
Well, recusal will be warranted. By recusal, we mean that Rod Rosenstein no longer manages the case, and Bob Mueller would have another boss, which is a little problematic as to who that would be. We can get to that in a minute. Recusal would be warranted, according to the DOJ, if their ethics team, which is a team of ethics experts that work for the DOJ, decides. He's basically saying, I'm going to let them decide. When would it be warranted? When you are both a witness and running the investigation. You can't be both. You got to be one or the other.
Can I ask you a quick question, and then we'll move on? Is this the same total or in part ethics team that looked at Jeff Sessions' refusal?
Yes.
Because we talked
I don't know if
about
it's the same human beings, but it's the same
but
office.
it's the same unit,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
we've seen this before.
Yes, we have. So Senator Graham's argument, and on its face it makes a lot of sense, is Rod Rosenstein signed the memo to the president setting forth the reasons that would justify firing Jim Comey. He participated in conversations with the president. Bob Mueller is suggesting that part of what the president's reasons were was to was to punish Comey for not stopping the Russian investigations. This is an alleged allegation. I'm not saying this happened. And that motivation was obstruction of justice. So therefore, we need the testimony of Rod Rosenstein to say, why was Jim Comey fired? Was he fired because the president feared the Russia investigation? This is at a time before Mueller was in office.
Sure.
Or was he fired because the president just didn't like the way he handled the Hillary Clinton investigation?
Well, some people say that fire triggered the second, the special counsel.
Okay, so Bob Mueller has a choice.
Okay.
Do I want Rod Rosenstein to be my boss, or do I want him to be my witness? If I want him to be my boss, I have another witness who was there at all those meetings and who participated in the drafting, or at least signed off on the memo. Jeff Sessions.
But he's already recused.
Yes, so he may very well, rather than trigger 2 recusals, use Jeff Sessions as his witness in this Jim Comey firing escapade.
Robert Mueller has said that he wouldn't, and correct me if I misunderstood what he said, he wouldn't move to charge this president. Did I misunderstand that?
No, you understood his principal mouthpiece as saying that. You never heard that from, that's what Mayor Giuliani has said, but you never heard that from Bob Mueller.
That's what he said he was told. Okay,
Bob Mueller, unlike Ken Starr, who was on television once a week in that era when he was investigating Whitewater, Bob Mueller has never said a peep to the public. He is very, very dutiful in this respect.
Do you doubt that that's the case?
I doubt that that's the case because of the depth of the level of their investigation.
The reason I ask is that we're going around and around, and it seems like Bob Mueller retains his power, and I wonder how that happens. But what you're saying is, A, we don't know what he has.
Right.
And B?
We won't know what he has until he either says, I'm not indicting anybody, here's what I found, or here are the indictments, now we'll try these cases. And he doesn't have to show his cards. Contrary to my dear friend, former judge and Congressman Gohmert, he doesn't have to show documents in the middle of a criminal investigation. He has the privilege of keeping those secret until the investigation is over.
I saw you shaking your head as I was talking with the congressman. He was very impassioned. I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
House Speaker Paul Ryan is trying to calm a growing civil war in the ranks on the issue of immigration. House Republicans are holding a meeting today as some moderates have been joining with Democrats looking to force a series of floor debates on several immigration bills. Can a deal be struck that would satisfy conservatives and moderate lawmakers? Well, we've been asking that question for years. A live report with reaction from a lawmaker who attended today's meeting. Stay close. A bit of a growing tug of war now between moderate and conservative Republican House members on the issue of immigration. House Republicans held a 2-hour immigration conference earlier today. Moderates joining forces with some Democrats working to get support for what they call a discharge petition that would force a debate on a series of immigration bills. House Speaker Paul Ryan is trying to discourage backers of that petition effort. Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill to break it all down for us. Mike.
Well, Harris, good afternoon. There's been intense pressure with moderate Republicans willing to work with Democrats to force addressing immigration. So Speaker Paul Ryan had that big conference meeting this morning, trying to see if they can come up with a consensus GOP plan. This is there are 215 signatures on what is known as a discharge petition signed by Democrats and some moderate Republicans, just shy of the 218 they need. But the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee says he thinks Speaker Ryan convinced his members to hold off.
I believe that was pretty loud and clear that will be not go forward. The discharge petition actually did put pressure to get us where we are today, to have this conference, to move forward. But I don't think there's any will in the conference to move forward with the discharge petition.
Some key conservatives are stressed about how to handle the so-called dreamers and a path to citizenship.
It's always like the Republicans have to come up with a solution. The Democrats haven't put out any bills, anything on paper, any policy whatsoever, right? They just say no, no, no. They said no to Goodlatte, 700,000 DACA. Then Trump said 1.8 million DACA. Democrats said no. What are they yes on?
Top Democrats are watching and wondering what the GOP might offer.
This morning, the Republicans are meeting on immigration. Lord knows what will come out with that. Well, hopefully, the Lord knows. We've been praying very hard on it. For too long, young dreamers across the country have been stuck under a cloud of fear and uncertainty.
Adding to the pressure, the entire House is up for re-election in just 5 months. Just another complication when dealing with an issue that brings out so much passion. Harris?
Mike, thank you very much. For more on this, let's bring in a lawmaker who actually was at today's meeting, Republican Congressman Kevin Yoder of Kansas, chairman of the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee. Great to see you today. Do we know what the president wants in all of this?
Well, I think the president wants what he committed in his campaign, which is to secure the border. You know, he's pledged his support behind a border wall, and he's also committed to finding a permanent solution for children who were brought to this country through no fault of their own, the DACA children. He's also supported a solution for that. And so I think the president's put a pretty good compromise on the table that would solve both issues, and it's just a matter of getting Congress to that point.
So you were at this meeting 2 hours today, and you're talking about this, and we've laid out what the man who would have to sign it wants. So what was the conversation like? Because it sounds like a battle.
You know, it was actually very productive. Sometimes we go into those meetings and, you know, there are a lot of verbal blows and people aren't agreeing, and I thought that we made a lot of progress today, and you have very conservative members of the Republican conference and more moderate members coming together and talking about the core principles we need to pass. I think the American people are counting on this Republican Congress to solve this issue. Our border has been too vulnerable to drug trafficking and human trafficking for too long, and so the whole point of this is we need to secure our southwest border in particular and keep the American people safe.
Okay.
I was actually just down in the Rio Grande Valley a few days ago and had a chance to personally view the challenges we face.
Yeah, well, we had a report on earlier this hour where the numbers are up, although they went to the lowest that we've seen in quite some time just recently. So that tick up is still better than what it was a year or so ago, but it is what it is. It's on the increase. I want to ask you about this discharge petition and what you think will happen moving forward.
You know, I don't know that the discharge petition is going to go forward. I think we'll have to see what happens at the end of the day. I think today's the deadline. But I think the progress we made today, where people were really working together, everyone's negotiating in good faith. We want a good conservative solution to the immigration challenge in this country, and we don't want a Nancy Pelosi, Democrat-led amnesty proposal that doesn't solve the underlying problem. Look, the reason there are millions of children here that came here to the country is because we have a broken immigration system, and that's a symptom of the real problem. And the real problem is we don't have a secure southern border. That's what we've got to fix in any bill that goes forward.
Congressman Representative Dave Bratt of Virginia said that Democrats are standing in the way of all of this. They're not coming to the table and just saying no. They're not bringing to the table ideas, just saying no. But you all have to work together real quickly on how you come together.
Well, I think the majority of Americans want to see us secure the southern border. They want to protect the American people. And I think the majority of Americans want to see us come up with a solution for children that are brought to this country. I think we can do both of that in a bill. It will require bipartisanship. It's going to need 60 votes in the Senate. So the idea that you can just ram through something that only Republicans support, that's not going to happen. Right. So I think the reality is something's going to come to the president's desk with Republican and Democratic support. And I think it's imperative we get that done this summer. I think we're making progress.
And from what I'm seeing, it may have some amnesty in it, maybe not total. Maybe there's a compromise on that. Congressman Yoder of Kansas, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me on the show, Harris.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is claiming that Democrats are in a position to take back control of the Senate in the midterm elections. What are the chances of that happening? The RNC chairwoman is here. Ronna McDaniel, can't wait to talk with her. She's up next. Plus, awaiting a major event at the White House, President Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister taking questions shortly, days before the president is set to sit down with North Korea's dictator. Stay close. Democrats face a brutal electoral map in the midterm elections, defending 10 seats that President Trump won. Yet they seem to be gaining confidence about retaking the majority in the Senate. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says he sees Republicans as vulnerable in several races, telling Politico, quote, "When you look race by race, we have a very good chance. We are much, much closer than people would ever think," end quote. Joining me now is RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel. Ronna, always great to have you on the program. So how can people look at it so differently? What does Chuck Schumer see about a potential blue wave in the Senate?
Well, I think Chuck Schumer is trying to fundraise, so he has to project optimism, but the map clearly favors Republicans. As you mentioned, Harris, there are 10 states where President Trump won, where there are Democrat incumbents. Some of those states he won by over 40 points. We've put the best ground game in place at the RNC that we've ever had going into a midterm. I'm optimistic not only that we'll keep the Senate, but that we'll expand and pick up seats this November.
So Chuck Schumer is pointing to Dean Heller's vulnerability that he talks about, and then Republicans point to 4 particularly vulnerable Democrats in blood red states. So 1 against 4, again, not really sure how you look at those odds and come out on top, but your thoughts?
Yeah, and let's look at this past Tuesday. I mean, Democrats on the House side were counting on California to usher in this blue wave, which became a ripple when more Republicans turned out in these battleground House seats that they were looking at. And then you look at the Senate side, you look at Bob Menendez, a senator in New Jersey, who only got 62% of the vote against a totally unfunded Democrat challenger. There are opportunities across the map. And here's why Republicans are seeing an uptick in our enthusiasm and in our voters engaging in this election, because they're seeing results from Republican leadership. Unemployment at record low, wages are up. People are feeling good about this economy, and they know that the Democrats for the past year and a half have sat on their hands in the biggest temper tantrum in American history because they've refused to accept that Donald Trump is the president, and they've said, we're not going to work with him on anything. No, 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 resist, 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 obstruct, obstruct, obstruct. And what they've done is they've resisted more jobs, they've resisted higher wages, and they've resisted helping average working class American families that are now seeing the benefits of deregulation, tax cuts, and they attribute that to Republicans. And that's why I think we're even in a better position to expand our majorities.
It's
in
interesting
November.
that you point to the economy, because one of the questions that I've been asking Democrats about is, there's a gap. We actually have more jobs available than we have people for them. Democrats could come forth with some skills-based ideas to close that gap. It's kind of interesting. Let's move on, though, and talk about Democrat Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. He says that he regrets now having backed Hillary Clinton and that he's looking at President Trump. For 2020, if that's the man who can get the job done and he agrees with his policies, well, then Joe Manchin will back him. He does vote with the president about 60% of the time. What is happening? Is he about to join the Republican Party?
Oh, my goodness. Joe Manchin is obviously concerned about his race to be flip-flopping on his support for Hillary Clinton. I mean, we have it on the record, and go look at our GOP website or our Twitter account. Time after time after time, Joe Manchin on video saying how much he supported Hillary Clinton, how he trusted her, how Bill and Hillary were his good friends. And now suddenly, when his seat is in jeopardy and President Trump is wildly popular in West Virginia, he's embracing President Trump. And here's what I'll say to the voters of West Virginia, who are so smart. Don't fall for it. Joe Manchin may be a nice guy. Have him over for a barbecue. Do not send him back to the Senate, because he will vote for Chuck Schumer every time to be the Senate Majority Leader. And Chuck Schumer is not your friend.
Ronna McDaniel speaking candidly to Joe Manchin, if he's watching. Great to see you today, the chair of the RNC. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Harris.
Absolutely. We are now just minutes away from a joint news conference between President Trump and Japan's Prime Minister. Stay with us. And we are just minutes away from that joint news conference between President Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister, as the North Korea summit is now coming into full view. Let's bring in the power panel. Michael Fuchs served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs with the Obama administration. Harry Kazianis, Director of Defense Studies at the Center for National Interest. Gentlemen, great to see you. Harry, I want to start with where we are now with how many times these men have met the president and the Japanese Prime Minister, and the significance of what Japan thinks they can get in terms of a deal ahead of the summit.
Well, it's a bromance, Harris. I mean, Shinzo Abe was the first foreign leader to come see President-elect Trump, actually, right at Trump Tower, after he was elected. So the Japanese consider that the U.S. alliance pivotal for them. And the reason's actually quite obvious. Here in the United States, we're very worried about North Korea. But for us, we're only facing down, maybe 5 or 6 ICBMs. The Japanese are facing hundreds of missiles that could be armed with chemical weapons, biological weapons, and nukes. So Shinzo Abe is really trying to speak to President Trump to hold firm. When he goes to the summit, I think Abe wants to see a nuclear deal. Or, to be honest, Abe might not want Trump to go. So this is going to be a very pivotal conversation and meeting.
Well, Michael, I'm seeing that Abe may want that pressure campaign to continue and for there to be more toughness in this relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, the U.S.-Japan alliance is an essential part of regional stability in the Asia Pacific. And from day one, Prime Minister Abe has been doing everything possible to build a personal relationship with President Trump, flying straight to Trump Tower after the election, as Harry mentioned. Unfortunately, to date, that attempt has not really seemed to pay off very much. President Trump, time and again, has really angered the Japanese, both through these tariffs that he has imposed that are going to hit Japan, the surprise summit announcement with Kim Jong-un throwing out the maximum pressure campaign and pivoting towards diplomacy, which took Prime Minister Abe by surprise, as well as scrapping the Iran deal, which also could threaten Japan with sanctions. So again, I think that there are some real fears here on the Japan side.
Harry, I want to give you last word here. Those men are in a working lunch. We're going to see them pop up soon with a news conference. What happened today, do you think, behind closed doors?
I think Japanese Prime Minister Abe is going to say to President Trump, please, Mr. President, do not go to Singapore unless you can get a nuclear deal first. There's a lot of fear on the Japanese side. If that President Trump shakes Kim Jong-un's hand without any sort of agreement, it would be a historic mistake. So I think Abe is going to press the president
Don't you think the president knows that, though?
I think to a certain extent, but there's a lot of angst in Japan that the president could give away something here to the North Koreans. Remember, it's a big concession to go to Singapore and not get a deal. So I think the prime minister is really going to press him.
Gentlemen, thank you. To the viewers, we'll be right back. Live look on the left of the screen of what's breaking news. Rose Garden, the president and Japanese prime minister, about to step up to lecterns there and give their dual news conference. I'm Harris. Here's Dana.